So, another year passes, and what's new about your home? I mean, maybe you did change that stinky carpet, or you finally got around to insulating the attic. You might even have invested in some bifold doors. Or maybe you built one of these. It's that time again. Time to seek out the Royal Institute of British Architects House of the Year.
That, of course, isn't structural glass.
Yes, it is. The judges have looked at hundreds of entries from the length and breadth of Britain to make up a long list for the 2018 prize that'll knock your socks off. Standing here is quite a monumental thing. From homes that are bespoke and finely crafted. Yes, that's a door. It's like the Crystal Maze. To houses that are thrustingly ambitious. You were egging them on then?
Absolutely.
The houses we profile will be cut down to a short list of just 7 before we find out in the final programme which is House of the Year 2018. And same as usual, you get to come along for a jolly good nosy. No questions asked. Of the long-listed houses we're looking at, I've taken it upon myself to separate them into 4 categories. Houses with a past, extreme homes, and houses built with interesting materials. And this time, houses that dare to be different. In this programme, we've got a group of houses that take a very clear stance about where they are, flexing and responding to their surroundings. Some answer that calling sympathetically, arriving with a polite nod and a welcome gift for the neighbours. Others dare to be different. They're not afraid to shake things up a bit, cause a kerfuffle, startle next door's cat. Helping me to look around our group of homes that dare to be different will be design expert and writer Michelle Gunderhin.
What a triumphal entrance to your home, isn't it?
And architect Damien Burrows.
Oh, nice.
There we go.
Nice.
Traditionally, we think of confrontation as being anathema to the British character. We don't like to make a fuss. But is that really true? See, from Boudicca to Charles Darwin, Emmeline Pankhurst, Johnny Rotten, we have a long tradition of rebellion against the status quo. But honestly, chaps, that doesn't mean to say we have to be rude about it. Our first rebellious house is in Hackney in East London, where among the genteel Victorian villas, a grey slab has landed on what was formerly a rundown old workshop. It's home to Jess, an artist and owner of Finks, the neighbourhood cafe. I've just seen your house next door, yeah?
Yes.
Bolted on.
Yes, I never leave this corner.
Do people come in and tell you what they think of the
They
house?
do, yes, for good or for bad. Sometimes I get a kind of, it's that you next door, I love it, you know, from the kind of architecty types. And one day someone came in and said, that is the ugliest building in Hackney, which was actually a bit of a highlight.
Jess's controversial house is in fact 3 dwellings. The bottom 2 floors are separate flats that she rents out, while above she lives in a maisonette on the top 2 floors with a double-height living space, 2 bedrooms and 2 balconies. While the outside render looks all tough, dark and chewy, inside the house reveals a softer centre. Jess and her architect used thick lime wash to coat the concrete block walls.
I really wanted to sort of have the honesty of the blocks, but kind of soften it so it's not too much like a prison.
The lime wash and bronze handrail suggest the Mediterranean more than they do modern penitentiary. And through to the main act.
Yes.
Is it?
Come on in.
That's very clever. Big concrete frame.
Yep.
With an infill of blockwork, just lime washed. The living area goes from a regular height kitchen past an enclosed balcony before opening into a lounge that's half normal height and half double height space. The freedom for Jess to take half the floor out is thanks to the concrete frame that holds up the whole building. It was poured into formwork to make a 3D grid, which could then be infilled afterwards with the blockwork. Never let it be said that double height space is a waste of first floor footprint, because this is great. Now, do you enjoy this, or do you really think, actually, I should have put a little mezzanine in
No, I
there?
love it. I absolutely love it. The space over there is quite low, and actually, if it were anything else, it would feel quite cramped. As it is, that feels cosy because it's in comparison to this.
Yeah.
Which I love.
The RIBA jury were also smitten. They noted the exquisite detailing, the strong and yet delicate design, and a love of concrete that derives from Jess's obsession with blocks. Before she took on the cafe, Jess was a conceptual artist. She'd been using blocks for years in her work.
So I was spending a lot of my time kind of playing with these blocks in different sort of forms, but a lot of them just kind of sat in my brain and maybe didn't really go anywhere, and now maybe this is kind of part of where they've gone. It was really interesting to work with concrete in its right context. I've always, I did a piece where I put sort of concrete blocks in a fridge, but here they're just actually a building, so it's quite straightforward.
Oh, so you've been able to get concrete blocks out of your system by finally building with them. Yeah, rather than using them as a conceptual material. Jess hasn't been afraid to push creatively at this design. Rather than being inspired by the buildings on the street, she's inventively taken ideas from the street itself. Tarmac. Wall. They look very similar, don't they? And that is because here they've specified a crushed, dark, small stone in the render, in a mix which, as far as I can see, is a standard Highways Department specification. Radical road-like render would seem a surefire way to annoy the neighbours.
This is a very modern structure and literally opposite my front door. How would that be? When I found out it was going to be concrete, I sort of held my breath.
And the architect behind this design knew it would be a tough sell.
Like probably any project, some people were incredibly supportive, some people were very sceptical, occasionally openly hostile.
Had her neighbours objected to the plans, the project could have been derailed before it got off the ground. But never underestimate the power of a flat white and a top-notch sarnie.
Jess started setting up the cafe next door, and she ended up kind of growing this kind of community life around it.
That must have been very helpful for you, taking the project through planning.
Yeah, no, it was great. And it was great that she had very open communication with everybody in the neighbourhood, even those who were kind of hostile to the project.
Yeah.
Even though this monolith was about to be built, it was kind of done in a way that we felt comfortable with it, because I kind of trusted her vision, because it was clearly she was a woman of taste.
She was here, so that made an enormous difference.
We actually ended up with no objections.
None.
Quite.
For a dark grey building that is uncompromisingly modernist.
Yes. Obviously, if you do a massive building on a residential street, nothing's without a bit of conflict.
Yeah.
But it's all been, we're all still friends, it's all okay.
The cocktail required to build this house consisted of creativity, bloody-mindedness, a measure of sweet, gentle charm, and some ice-cool determination, all of which seem present in the full-bodied character of the building. It's beautiful. Not much of a view.
No, this is my secret outside space. In the summer, I sleep out here.
Seriously?
I sleep out here, and I'm totally private.
So you lie out here? You bring a mattress out, or what?
Yeah, I've got a little pad.
Have you? Okay.
Yeah. Just have a little...
I haven't set my alarm.
It's okay, because the sun will come up.
Jess can sleep soundly, knowing that she has shepherded to this place a bold new piece of architecture and brought the neighbours along too.
My honest opinion is I wish it was mine. I think it's beautiful. I think it really enhances the area.
Well, mostly.
I mean, I don't hate it, but I don't love it either, I'm sorry.
On a bleak February afternoon, it is a little bit gulag. And so I've named it Gulag Chic.
What a bold and beautiful building that is, The result of fertile minds working together, and that's the point. It's not a house which has come about through litigation or through pushing or aggression or, for that matter, appeasement. No, this is a building that's great thanks to a really rare process in construction, and that is creative collaboration. There are 4 more long-listed houses to explore.
The banks of the River Thames are most emphatically not the place for architectural experiments of this nature.
Before we find out which of them are shortlisted for the RIBA House of the Year 2018. The House of the Year crown, like a hard hat, has an adjustable rim to accommodate all comers, from mansions to maisonettes, who wish to try it on. But it is decreed that each year there will be only one house that fits it perfectly. So what does it take to win the RIBA House of the Year? 2015's winner, the geological Flint House, seemed to rise from the very rock beneath, and yet within it was all crystalline delight. Oh, Lord, it has its own grotto. That is a stroke of genius, that. Richard Murphy's house in Edinburgh won in 2016, a fabulous Wallace and Gromit home of invention and eccentricity.
Al fresco basil.
Too much. Then last year it was the turn of the wonky castle, Caring Wood, a modern Kentish manor house that looks to the future of multi-generational living.
I remember on my first visit, I thought it was humongous. We often walk around saying, "Where are you?" And someone was like, "I'm over here, and look, where is that?"
3 very idiosyncratic winners, each one highly thoughtful, rooted in place, and very adventurous. So, what makes a great classic piece of architecture? National treasures like St Paul's Cathedral, the Houses of Parliament, the National Gallery extension, they were all reviled as monstrous when they were built. So we need the bold risk-takers who laugh in the face of fear and bravely stick their heads above the trenches. They might need a tin helmet to be on the safe side. Our next Dare to be Different house is in Henley on Thames, a place of pointy-roofed Riverside Tudor-Beathan sobriety. So chocolate box perfect, they film Midsummer Murders here. And behind this rusty metal gate, Michelle Agundahin is here to see a house that caused some controversy on the riverbank. This is Pheasants. Concrete, rusty metal, modernist lines. Everything you wouldn't expect just a stone's throw from the banks of the River Thames. And its edgy owners are retired entrepreneurs, Dick and Judith, who's also an artist.
There's a natural tendency for people to want to reprise what's already been successful, and a hesitancy to try anything new. Introducing something new, a new element, is really quite difficult.
After retiring, Dick and Judith decided to replace their 1950s bungalow with Pheasants, a home that the RIBA judges called an extraordinary challenge to convention.
Hello.
Hello, Michelle. Welcome to our home.
Quite a triumphal entrance to your home, isn't it?
The main house sits at the end of this sleek ornamental pond, opposite a guest house and studio. You enter through a reception hall which opens into a large living and dining space, with a ground floor kitchen and a master bedroom suite. Up the stairs are another 4 bedrooms with further stairs up onto the roof terrace.
Did you want to commission something controversial, though, or you just meant something new that wasn't necessarily the same as everything around it?
What we wanted to commission here was a country villa for the 21st century. We wanted to commission something that was
worthy of the site.
Worthy of the site. We put in a planning application, and of course it was hit a maelstrom of objection from all kinds of people.
Because you were creating a monstrosity on their river.
An industrial estate, a World War II pillbox. So a lot of stuff like that, which was quite difficult to take.
Their original plans were amended, but the revised ones also drew objections. Despite this, the council granted planning permission.
Well, why do you think people got that sort of level of animosity towards the new?
When you say, why are you doing this, and the answer is because I can, you know there won't be much sensible debate about it. So what can you do?
We did dig our toes in, and it was a challenge which we rose to and met. Ended in the High Court, judge ruled in our favour, and then we were able to move on.
I'm absolutely dying to see inside it then. I want to know if it was all worthwhile.
From the formal reception hall, you glide into a main living and dining area, with views to the formal pond one way and the river the other. Space flows here, from the kitchen to the ground floor master bedroom with ensuite. Everything you could need is on one floor.
We knew we were getting old, alas, and age has its problems, one of which is accessibility. The house has been designed with these very wide pivot doors and sliding doors, so if we do ever end up in wheelchairs, we can still move around and be fully active.
But there can't be many retirement homes fashioned from this much concrete.
The concrete, it doesn't weigh heavily on your head, but you're very aware of it.
So the beauty of the concrete is that it isn't cavernous and the whole thing is really quite cosy.
And it's to do with the colour, because it's very warm. We didn't want grey concrete.
They did extensive colour tests, sampling pigments and ingredients to perfection. Then every batch of concrete for the walls, benches, walkways and floors had to be matched. Alongside this, all the Corten steel elements were made to order and fitted, including this 7.8-ton cantilevered carport, which arrived in a single piece. It was all keenly observed by the locals.
I got lumbered with delivering the parish magazine, turning up here once a month, dropping the parish magazine off. The people in the village want to know what's going on, and I basically let them know there's a bit more rust on the steel, a bit more concrete gone in, another large piece of glass turned up, and it's all looking pretty different to everything else around here.
The neighbours did have time to adjust, though. All in all, it took 3 years to make the guest house, then another 4 years for the main house.
It was a long old project, what with the kind of legal battle to start off with, and then a 7-year build. Why did it take so long, do you feel?
It was the fault of the clients, constantly interfering. And I am a firm believer that there's got to be that discussion between the person who's designing it and the people who are going to be using it.
The architects on the other side of this creative tussle were Ivan Taha and Sarah Griffiths.
Dick and Judith actually preferred to stay living on the site while the construction was going on. So beyond just bringing mugs of tea and coffee to the contractors, they're on site more often than we are.
And so pleasurable, painful?
Oh, inevitably both.
Sarah recalls that Dick had a motto to get them through the project.
They wanted it right, not quick. And I think I heard that on many occasions.
The result is a house utterly suited to Dick and Judith, from, of and for them and their needs. There are upstairs bedrooms for when the grandchildren stay. Details are also personal. The leafy screens offer some respite from all those straight lines.
I know that you as an artist had a lot of involvement into its design, didn't you?
Yes, I'm afraid we asserted ourselves on this. We wanted something that kind of tied in with the garden, the natural lines, sort of an organic pattern. I worked out some designs. Bit of a labour of love, but we're really pleased.
It's very beautiful, and when the sun shines, you get a wonderful effect on
the patterns come in, and they also reflect on things like the bathroom walls are glass, so you get it reflected again.
The man of steel who helped make all this was Neil Fry.
Corten and concrete is quite brutalist, it's quite aggressive.
Judith's pretty leafy screen, it turned out, was fairly brutal for Neil to make.
A lot of the problem was the pattern, was making sure there was enough negative space between the patterns such that the panels were strong enough in themselves and that we didn't get buckling and bowing.
The panels were pre-rusted with salt water before they were allowed on site, because, as this building in Bilbao shows, the last thing you want on your clean laundered concrete is rusty skid marks. And Neil appears to have done his job. Pheasants appears unblemished. And the 14-year struggle hasn't tarnished Dick's sense of humour. He's collated some of the complaints about the various plans in the downstairs loo.
There's some classics here, aren't there? My favourite, I think, is probably this one. We truly believe that the banks of the River Thames are most emphatically not the place for architectural experiments of this nature.
How about that? What is really nice about having this building is that because it's Riverside, it is seen by a lot of people, and it does set the tone for, I hope, a new generation of buildings along the Thames.
This is a project that's probably had more than its fair share of ups and downs, but now that the dust has settled and the legal bills have been paid, what we're left with is a house that doesn't fit into Henley, but shows it a way forward.
Still 3 more great houses in our Dare to be Different category.
Started off life a little bit quirky and then we just built on that, I think.
I like that. It was always quirky.
Could one of these be the RIBA House of the Year 2018?
It all looks and feels very serene here.
It says here in the rule book that a house will have a number of bedrooms upstairs, kitchen, living room, dining room downstairs, more toilets than the total number of occupants, and somewhere here, a set of bifold doors. But what if that isn't enough? I mean, what if you want to do something different? What do you do with the rule book then? For the next house in our Dare to be Different category, I'm in polite North London. Lots of straight-laced townhouses. And here's another one. Dartmouth Park House. Looks like all the rest. Grey. Grey. Hello.
Hello.
Karen.
Very good, yeah.
Colin, pleased to meet you. Thanks very much. What a place. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The unpretentious grey boarded-up shopfront conceals a little paradise island, a tropical fern tree, warm wooded balconies, an exotic spiral staircase, and an unnatural amount of sunlight for a Victorian house. This is great. Wow. Yeah. Tall. There's no inkling outside that it's like this. Its totally tropical owners are Karen, a music, property and travel entrepreneur, and her husband, Colin, a computer programmer and part-time DJ. The house is set over 4 floors. In the basement is an office. On the ground floor, there's a living and DJing room with a courtyard and guest room. On the first floor, a kitchen, diner and veranda. And on the top floor, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, all linked by a wild and winding staircase. There had been an office on the ground floor and a flat upstairs, but they gutted the place and fitted it out with a new interior made of Nicaraguan mahogany. Why Nicaragua? What was the contact that led you there?
I went on holiday to Nicaragua and bought an island, as you do, in a lake, and built a sustainable hotel on it. And when we were talking to the architects over here about using lots of wood, I thought it would be a really lovely idea to kind of bring some of that wood, which is very personal to me, obviously, over to here to use in the house.
This Rainforest Alliance certified wood was used in every stair tread, window frame, door frame and plank of decking. The RIBA judges admired the warm and consistent finish it gave in this unusual and exotic home. The wood was made to measure 5,000 miles away and then arrived in a shipping container, the flat pack of nightmares. But sections like these perfectly curved banisters arrived as straight lengths, and so John Stidworthy, a specialist joiner, was brought in with his high-tech wood-bending steam box.
The principle of this is that the water boils, the steam comes up the tube and disperses through the box. The timber is already in the box, cooking.
After an hour or so, the heat and moisture cause the wood fibres to soften enough for it to be bent with clamps. The method has been used to make everything from rowing boats to grand pianos since the ancient Egyptians.
Yeah, it's looking pretty good.
The mahogany wasn't always so easy to work with, though.
It was the long curves that kept snapping and sending bits of mahogany all over the workshop.
Thankfully, the Nicaraguans had packed lots of spares, and John's patience and resilience has resulted in a set of beautifully crafted stairs that provide the backbone of this house and work a lot harder than your average set of steps.
What stairs do is connect floors in buildings. They allow people to use a townhouse like this efficiently. But here, the stairs are doing so much more. Here, the stairs allow light to pour down into the building. They allow the place to be visually open. You can communicate vertically in the place. And they are beautiful. Where are my keys? Can you, when you come down, can you bring my keys?
Once you're off the staircase, the house ignores the traditional approach to layout. The ground floor lounge morphs into Colin's DJ zone, which in turn becomes a palm tree in a courtyard, finishing in a guest room at the back. Heading up through the 9-metre-tall hallway, you arrive at the first floor, where instead of a pair of bedrooms, you have a kitchen diner with a view.
Just a really nice feeling, like just being able to sort of look out onto sort of loads of greenery. And
It sort of suggests that more people should be sort of swapping stuff around a bit and put the kitchen up in the building, elevated.
It's a quirky space anyway. It started off life a little bit quirky and then we just built on that, I think.
I like that. It was always quirky.
yeah. Suits us.
The innovative design employs skylights to illuminate darkened corners like Colin's basement office, or on the veranda where the view is especially quirky.
It is always a thrill to stand on a glass roof, to be suspended, as it were, almost in mid-air. It is quite another thrill to be stood on a glass roof looking down into a bath. Not that there's anybody there.
The architects tasked with turning Colin and Karen's quirks into a livable home were Anthony Boulanger and Yoria Manolopoulou.
I think there's a charming and there's a romantic quality to the building. It's imbued with their loves and their passions and their backgrounds.
It's a piece of architecture that is half designed by us, and it is complemented by Karen and Colin.
It truly feels like it's a very personalized home for them.
Karen and Colin have thrown out the conventions of a London townhouse, creating an unusual upside-down tropical house that's also a very good party pad for their friends and neighbours.
It's a lovely place to hang out, but it's also very much a warm home, a very reflection of those two.
This place is not normal. This place is different. It's the next evolutionary step for the conventional, narrow, urban townhouse, where walls disappear in order to make way for big slabs of furniture or just for fresh air, and where staircases become sculptural. And the payoff for all of that, the benefit, is that these guys get a home which is absolutely chock full of light and delight and fun. Lamination, which is the process of gluing lots of thin strips of something together, is used a lot in construction. You can take materials which are naturally flimsy and wobbly, glue them together, and lo and behold, emerge with something rigid, hard and strong. Goodness me, there is power and strength in numbers.
Here in Newcastle upon Tyne, the next entry in our competition is definitely stronger because it's not one house but two stuck together, a half-submerged, semi-detached called Ousburn Road. This stylish modern thing could have had the neighbours up in arms in a traditional suburban area like this, unless you were building with them. One side is owned by Tim, a furniture maker, and Pippa, a psychologist, while next door live Libby, an actor, and her son Fred.
So we've been neighbours for 24 years. We bought houses next door to each other. So over those years, a strong friendship has been forged.
The neighbours share one building, but have arranged their halves differently. In Tim and Pippa's house on the ground floor, there's a garage come workshop, utility and guest room. And on the first floor, 2 bedrooms and an open-plan living space. Next door in Libby's house on the ground floor there are 2 bedrooms, a garage and utility room, and like Tim and Pippa on the first floor there are 2 more bedrooms and an open-plan living space. Both houses are connected with a shared garden, very civilised. Building with your neighbour is, of course, incredibly brave.
Most people would run a mile from that kind of thing. You live together up there, and now you live together down here.
We're very good friends. We enjoyed being neighbours for 24 years at the top. Wanted to continue to be neighbours. We were looking to downsize, and suddenly we realised that at the bottom of our garden, we had a building plot.
So we built it in the bottom of the garden.
If building in the backyard wasn't daring enough, their plot was on a hill. So having dug out 1,200 tons of soil, they built a wall to keep the earth back. The building set into a slope, so it could have felt dingy and dark, but Tim and Pippa's hallway doesn't feel like a burrow.
Oh, wow. I mean, this is just so fantastically light and bright in here.
Yes, that was the key part of the design, because obviously at the bottom of the hill and built into the hill, getting light was the concern.
This room is actually underground.
As well as the underground guest room, Tim has his workshop on this floor. This giant skylight and glass bridge above bring light down into this minimal hallway, in which the truly stick-out feature is the sculptural cantilevered staircase.
We're very, very proud of this. I think originally it was Pip's idea to have the chunky concrete steps which have been made by a friend of ours.
That friend was Russ Coleman, a concrete artist.
So in this, these bits of sculptures from 25 years ago.
As well as steps, he also makes light shades and concrete vegetables.
It's akin to cooking, really. You can have a batter mix or a cake mix or a sponge mix.
Russ went for more of a super thick Christmas pudding mix with Tim and Pippa's stairs.
There's an addition of extra fibres and a bit of polymer to strengthen them.
The judges praised Usburn as a testament to the passion of both architects and clients, and an exemplar for contemporary living. Nowhere better seen than on the magnificent open-plan first-floor living room, gloriously secluded, yet connected to its setting.
We spent extra money on this glazing. It was very important for us that there was as little intrusion into that wonderful view as possible. So all the framework is recessed in the ceiling and the walls in the floor, and you just have these very fine dividers.
And it all looks and feels very serene here now, but I imagine this was a project that was not without its challenges.
You can see the hillside, the amount of earth that had to be excavated to clear the site. It was a huge engineering project, actually. I mean, one of the problems we faced was that underneath here is a whole load of tunnels and
empty spaces.
It was described to me, the land that you're trying to build on is a bit like a packet of cornflakes.
There were 14th century abandoned drift mines underneath, a rabbit warren of tunnels originally dug for coal that had to be stabilised by filling with tons of poured concrete before the masonry structure for the houses could be put up. It cost £300,000 to build each house. Tim and Pippa stayed in their old house during construction, but Libby had to sell hers quickly to fund the project.
I lived with friends for a year. I did come down and check out what was happening. It was a very big haul for a long time. Nothing was happening quick enough.
There was no turning back for you. You've
None.
sold your house and moved out.
Exactly.
So you were really probably watching your money just disappear into those foundations.
Just took forever.
Now finished, the end result is as far removed from a hole in the ground as you could possibly imagine. Tim, Pippa and Libby aren't the only ones daring to be different by building at the ends of their gardens. Their architects built their own house round the corner and hope that Libby, Tim and Pippa can inspire others to do the same.
In the 1800s, this little quiet cul-de-sac was a major thoroughfare up until the days when they blocked it off. We're all very keen to populate this old back street. Tim, Pippa and Libby bring a bit of activity to the lane down here.
Already, Tim, Libby and Pippa's brave architecture is starting to inspire others locally.
We are looking at getting an extension, and it will be in a similar style, quite an industrial, modern look.
Building a house with your neighbours, I guess it's something worth considering. I didn't see too many arguments. It sits very well on the slope of the hill, it blends in nicely and looks great.
While many of us might try and separate ourselves from our neighbours, these guys did quite the opposite. They came together, pooling their resources to build 2 beautiful and bespoke homes.
One bold and bright, daring house yet to see.
Some of the neighbours, it became known as the bloody red house.
Before we find out which homes have made it to the shortlist of 2018's RIBA House of the Year.
All it took was for Clark Kent to put on a pair of glasses and nobody knew he was Superman. So what do you do if you're trying to smuggle in a superpowered house amongst the good people of Metropolis, It's going to take more than a disguise from the joke shop, isn't it? Especially when the house is wearing a big red superhero suit.
London, where it seems every other street is made of the same London stock brick. Nice, neat, uniform and yellow. Maybe with a risque bit of red detailing. Until this cheeky little rebel turned up. Red House, an end of terrace with sunburn. Stephen Davis and Will Burgess are behind this project. And Damien Burrows has gone to meet them at... what's it called again?
Hey, guys.
Hi. Some of the neighbours, it became known as the bloody red house. And I think it was because they were builders' vans. You know, we share lots of boundaries with lots of neighbours. And we just sort of... it just stuck.
Red House has been built on the site of an old garage. You enter and step down to a sunken ground floor, which leads to a living area, kitchen, 2 courtyards and a TV room. Then upstairs are 2 bedrooms on the first floor and a master bedroom with ensuite on the second. And now the skips have gone, it sits happily at the end of this terrace, thanks in part to sympathetic details that the RIBA jury thought were bold and assertive without being disrespectful.
As a piece of architecture in a house, it feels very settled. It kind of has the feeling like it's always been here.
We certainly hope that it feels natural and not forced.
I think we want our buildings to feel like they're part of their surroundings, that they haven't imposed their will on the street or their setting.
Inside, they've dug down the ground floor by over a metre, maintaining a low profile, while also spreading out to fill the whole plot to make the ground floor much larger than it appears from the street.
Ah, this is interesting to come straight in on the stairs.
It means we managed to get 3 floors in the space of 2 of our neighbours, so we got effectively a larger house.
Great spatial tricks continue. The ground floor is a series of loosely aligned, wide, slightly weirdly angled rooms, a world away from the dark and narrow spaces you'd expect of a Victorian terrace.
Wow. I mean, this is a beautiful collection of just little interconnected spaces. This is clever stuff.
And what we did was sort of push all the spaces to the edges, and you end up with these kind of courtyards, which make it incredibly private, so we're not overlooked.
Kitchen, lounge, diner, snug. All these familiar spaces are here, but arranged around courtyards in a way that refreshes your idea of what a terraced house can be. Red House was commissioned by a developer as a one-off, and it was bought a year ago by Daisy, a dancer, and her husband Sean, a chief technology officer. But it's not just the more open spaces that caught their attention.
This is one of my favourite bits of the house. We've got a little hidden door. Guests, they go, where's the downstairs toilet? Have you got a downstairs toilet? And I just say, yes, just push this wall. And
oh, nice.
There we go.
Nice.
It's really, obviously, functional, really useful to have a downstairs toilet, but you almost don't want it to you don't want to see it too much, so it's, perfect.
You haven't found a guest here hopping from foot to foot saying, where is it?
Not yet.
Upstairs, the spaces are more conventional, with office, bedroom and bathroom on the first floor and a master bedroom suite on the second. But the stairs that lead you there are anything but.
Typical Victorian house would only allow itself a little bit of detail and interest, usually in the ceilings and the staircase. Is this a little bit of a nod to that detail?
Yeah, I think it is. I think looking at that craftsmanship and how we can bring that into this kind of staircase was, it was an important part of the design.
The curve of the landing is reflected in the arch of the window, part of a single concrete panel that was made off-site. It takes inspiration from the Victorian details of its neighbours.
First impressions matter, which is why outside many Victorian houses you'll find these beautiful tiled pathways. Now, Red House takes that pattern, abstracts it, and blows it up into this epic monolithic slab of concrete.
The man behind this one-of-a-kind creation was Martin Pinion. The team spent weeks experimenting with dyes to colour match the red bricks. Then a wooden version was made, which was then used as the model for a rubber mould.
You can see the complexity of the shape the architect was looking for. You can see that reflected in the mould. Complex part of it is actually in the demoulding. That's the part that can either make it or break it. Even though there's very, very tiny fragments of concrete, they all came off with perfectly intact. I think several people said it couldn't be done. I think it has paid off. Yeah, it does look spectacular.
But craftsmanship comes at a price, about £15,000 with installation.
So it's like buying quite a small family car and hanging it on your front facade and think, yes, I have just spent that much on this one component of this one house. It's become the motif of the house, I suppose, so it was worth investing in.
It's a credit to the property developer that they were prepared to invest in a one-off like Red House, but spending still had to be kept within sensible limits.
So with a house like this, what sort of budget are you looking at?
Well, the end figure was under £500,000 for the construction of the property.
To build a house like this, £500,000 with this sort of spatial configuration, seems like a bit of a steal to me. Red House fuses together the familiarity of Victorian architecture with the boldness of modernism. It links arms with its neighbours whilst quietly asserting itself. And I think it does this with a playfulness that's absolutely captivating.
Five very different houses with distinct personalities, but which will the jury think has the edge that could get them onto the shortlist for the 2018 RIBA House of the Year? Blackstone House, a monolithic slab that rejects conformity ever so politely. Pheasants, that shows that a Riverside home doesn't have to be watered down. Dartmouth Park, Nicaragua meets North London in a spiralling reinvention of the townhouse. Oosburn Road, a triumph of semi-attached teamwork. And Red House, a modern marvel of layout in a bright red onesie. So which have the jury picked to go through to the shortlist for the RIBA 2018 House of the Year? Niall Maxwell, one of last year's winners and a member of the jury, has come to reveal all. So, what have you shortlisted?
We've shortlisted Pheasants. The reason this was shortlisted was because it's an incredibly ambitious project. It works on two levels, the grandeur and the simplicity of home. I really enjoyed actually the way in which the landscape was used to bring these two buildings together. It's a very clever set of spaces that we enjoyed, but also the way in which that building sits up above the garden.
Thank you very much. That's good to know.
Good news.
Congratulations.
Well, congratulations to us all.
Certainly very delighted for Dick and Judith.
It's just a lovely place to live in. It works extraordinarily well, and we're very happy.
With Pheasants through to the shortlist, there's space for one more from this daring group of buildings. So Niall, what have you shortlisted?
We've shortlisted Red House.
So why have you shortlisted Red House?
It is a brilliant example of how to use a small infill site in a city and create some transformative architecture. But at the same time, it's not feeling out of place because it looks like it's bookending the terrace.
You live here?
I definitely live here. It's a really clever house. It's really well executed.
And great for one of the architects, Steve, who made the long list last year with his own house, number 49.
I think that's great. I mean, that's
cool.
Brilliant.
And it means we beat Steve's house that only got longlisted last year. So that's more important. Red House is better than number 49.
It's subjective.
So we're off with Red House and Pheasants, our first 2 on the shortlist. But 5 more must join them before we find out at the end of the series which has won House of the Year 2018.
All good and virtuous buildings respond to where they are, but the really special ones don't just hold up a mirror and mindlessly ape their surroundings. They reverberate to the spirit of a place. In the dialogue between place and architecture, they dare to push the conversation on in ways that can surprise, delight, and occasionally shock. As the late great playwright Neil Simon once said, if no one ever took risks, Michelangelo would have ended up painting the Sistine floor.
Next time, we'll be looking at houses with a past.
I like the crack in the wall.
That's intentional. We thought about that for a while and decided not to spend any money doing anything on that.
5 more breathtaking projects, all with a story to tell.
It was a storm away from complete loss.
If you could design and build your dream home, what would it be? And would you go for some kind of Howard Hughes Art Deco cliff top fantasy, or some kind of castle in the air up in the mountains somewhere? Or maybe what's lurking in your imagination looks a bit like one of these.
These are the fantastical homes on the long list, all hoping to win the Royal Institute of British Architects' prestigious House of the Year award.
Wow, this is clever stuff.
So far, we've seen houses from our Dare to be Different category.
Started off life a little bit quirky and then we just built on that, I think.
In today's episode, we're looking at a new category of 5 more houses, all historical homes, buildings with a past.
It was a storm away from complete loss.
All utterly transformed.
Oh God, wow. This is an incredible library.
At the end of the programme, we'll find out which of these spectacular homes have made it onto the shortlist.
I think that's great. I mean, that's brilliant.
Then, at the end of the series, we'll discover which of them is the winner of one of the most celebrated prizes for residential architecture, the 2018 House of the Year.
The best bit for you is that you don't even have to take your shoes off to look around these places, whereas I do.
So far in this series, we've revealed the first 2 buildings that have made it onto the shortlist. The chiselled zigzag that is Pheasants, and the super-powered Red House. This time we're looking at 5 historical houses from the long list, all with a fascinating past. Exploring these buildings with me is the architect Damien Burrows.
This is really what you call a sense of arrival.
And the interiors and design expert, Michelle Gunderhin.
The solidity of the walls makes me feel almost like I'm being given a big hug by this house.
In this programme, we're looking at houses with a past, buildings which have a history, which they remember and celebrate, no matter how many regrets or failed marriages they've suffered. Anyway, like people, their life stories are part of what makes them great buildings. Think of them as the raconteurs of the architectural world, fizzing with eye-popping tales that could keep you entertained into the small hours. The point being that every house in this episode has its own story to tell.
Our first stop is the East End of London. Wartime bombing, slum clearance, and development have all destroyed much of its precious stock of historic buildings. Yet in this tight little corner, one proudly remains. Stepping out of the gaslight and pea soup of 1890 into the 21st century is this, a late Victorian gin distillery. What was once a derelict spirit factory has been transformed into a light 2-bedroom home set over 2 floors. You enter into a large double-height living space with a TV room come spare bedroom and office, And then upstairs, 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and a hidden courtyard. The monumental challenge of converting this place might have been too much for most families, but not for Rupert Scott, an architect, and his wife, Leo Wood, an interior designer.
Frankie, you can have the little man or the train.
The East End is particularly rich in sort of different overlapping stories and buildings from different eras.
There's a real sense of history as well, and we love that.
Hello?
Hi.
Oh, hi.
Hello, hi.
Hello, Leo, yeah?
Yes.
How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Rupert, is that
Yes,
right? Yeah. I think the first thing that strikes me is that it feels very respectful.
We've tried to hold on to some of the old scars of the building that was here before, and they're all just indicators of the history, the industry, such as the lintels and some of these metal ties. And
There's a remnant of a brick arch there.
Yeah, so the buildings are all connected and they're all part of the same distillery, yeah.
I like the crack in the wall. Just...
Oh yeah, that's intentional. We thought about that for a while and decided not to spend any money doing anything on that. There was a time when it was pretty derelict and just a storage warehouse for a period of time.
A rat-infested storage warehouse.
Okay.
Yeah, so we didn't walk in and find lovely old kind of copper vats and traces of what had happened. We found an old snooker table, I think, and lots of
some wheelchairs.
grass and all sorts of random things in the building.
Inside, where once was darkness and dereliction, all is now airy and clean. The judges long-listed the house as an example of contemporary architecture patched together with a mix of repair work, reclamation and restoration. You can almost smell the spirit of the old gin distillery. The original large steel windows have been reinstated. The exposed steel stairs and beams hint at the building's industrial past. Rupert has designed an elegant and, importantly, modest home.
Quite simple, really.
Not too snazzy.
Yeah,
Not too snazzy.
Yeah.
Let's put that part of the brief.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Don't show off.
Don't show off, yeah.
There is something in you as a person. There's a kind of integrity, honesty. You would hate anything to feel too grand.
How much was it to do? Because old buildings tend to cost quite a bit more, usually.
The project, all in, including fees, was $450,000. A lot of the initial spend was on patching up and restructuring the existing building.
So where did the crunches come for you?
We had a baby mid-project, so that was a bit of a distraction.
That's quite a big stress, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think Leo's generally just more sort of emotionally consistent and strong in these situations than I am. I'm sort of was worrying more, I think, throughout.
Having a baby and working with an old building, well, it doesn't get more demanding than that. In addition, the couple were determined to preserve and repair the crumbling walls of the old distillery. They built an internal steel frame to brace the old walls and support the new first floor, which now houses a bathroom, 2 bedrooms, and this quiet, contemplative terrace hidden in the middle of the building.
What's this room down here?
That's our study.
Yeah.
A good-sized skylight, though.
Good-sized skylight, yeah.
So this deck has a number of important functions. Introducing light down there, introducing light into the back of that room here, through this glazed wall, into the stairwell, and beyond as well.
That, of course, isn't structural glass.
Yes, it is.
This is a tightly hemmed-in building, but you wouldn't know it. Rupert is a master of illumination.
There is a lovely, soft, grey light hitting the floor in this stairwell here that is being sort of spilled down into it from the lighting sources up here, including this enormous great skylight above me, and that enormous light well there with the glass wall, and the big painted wall behind it, which is bouncing light back into the building, which means that the bathroom, lit entirely through this opening, again, is bathed in this sort of soft, quite ethereal, really, really comforting light. But of course, with light, you also need, contrastingly, you need darkness, particularly for sleeping. So in the children's bedroom here is a shutter. What's interesting about this is not only does it keep all the light out, but It means that at night, when the helicopter lands at the hospital next door, the children aren't woken up because it's adding to the sound insulation. There we go. Light, darkness, and every conceivable shade of subtlety in between. Can't find the door handle.
Organising all these hidden windows on such an intimately surrounded site without sacrificing privacy needed a very 21st century approach.
We had to be really careful about the overlooking thing, and one of the things that really helped us with that was we got a 3D scan done, and that allowed us to be really careful about the angles that you were looking at, so what you want to see and what you don't want to see.
To work out the sight lines and avoid overlooking or being overlooked by their neighbours, Rupert and Leo got in Will Trossel to 3D scan the old building using technology adopted by NASA.
The technology we use is called terrestrial LiDAR scanning. That has an infrared laser on board the machine, and that is bounced off a wall or a floor to make a really comprehensive model of inside, out, and all of the context. So this is the building before anything had happened. I'm just taking the camera out to the view from his neighbour's window, with his neighbour's windows are here, and look down and have an understanding of what they would see and allow him to adjust sensitivity around privacy and which windows people could see in and through.
A staggering design tool to make sure you're not seen in your underwear. The work that's gone into lifting the spirits of this derelict old gin factory hasn't gone unnoticed by their neighbours. Ray Rinkoff's family have run a bakery here since 1911.
I think the property is fantastic what they've done. To make a living place out of that, it's a real hidden like a little gem, I think. I like it so much, I've told them I want first refusal when they sell it.
The thing about architecture is not only should it, as this place does, contribute to a place and help repair it, but it should also add more. This building is a wonderful conservation job. It lifts this little corner of London and contributes to its regeneration. And I find that irresistible.
We have 4 more extraordinary homes from our Houses with a Past category.
Was there a moment of cutting back all of the undergrowth and just going, oh?
There are many moments like that.
Until we discover which have made it to the shortlist for the RIBA 2018 House of the Year.
It's only natural, isn't it, that human beings want to improve their world. You know, you buy something and immediately you want to try and make it better. You know, you add some gizmos, the latest knickknacks, make it cool. Maybe even add some zing, only to discover that, oh, it's hideous. And the lesson here is that the bare bones of the thing, its core strength, is sometimes all you need to provide character. I've changed my mind. Can I have a double vodka, please? No ice.
No zhuzhing up needed for our next House with a Past, which Michelle Agundahin has travelled to see on the ragged and wild Devon coast. This is Coastal House, a 100-year-old farmhouse magically reinvented and brought into the 21st century, yet still in touch with its humble origins. This is a new pared-back, sleek, elegant home with thick oak beams and expansive living spaces, all wrapped in an elegant grey slate shell. You enter into a hallway that becomes a double-height dining room. To the left is a kitchen and utility room, and on the seaward side, a double-height living space with a mezzanine study. The hallway continues all the way up to the first and second floor, with 5 charming bedrooms. It's home to Sally and Edward, who have a strong connection to the area.
Chilla.
We were undergraduates together at the same university, and so
We used to come down here as students.
So we knew the place extremely well, and we wanted to make more of our lives down here because this is a place that we'd always been happy, however stressful life was. We will share the rest of our lives here in this place. Haven't quite got round to working out where I'd like to be buried, but it'll be somewhere on this site.
The early 20th century farmhouse that Edward and Sally bought couldn't have been more different from how it is now.
Hello.
Hi, morning.
Really nice to meet you.
Hello, Michelle, nice
Hi
to meet
there.
You could see it had really beautiful bone structure, but there'd been a series of owners who hadn't lived here permanently, so there wasn't a sense of creating a family home.
Over the years, the house had become a sprawling mess of rooms. They were tempted to knock the whole thing down.
We even had planning permission to do that at one point, but we realised that we would be losing something if we did that. Underneath all the layers of slightly awkward additions, there was something rather beautiful about the traditional farmhouse.
Thank you. Oh, wow.
Sally and Edward have stripped back the inside to uncover the best of the old building.
Now you really start to get the sense of what you were talking about with you unpeeling the original house.
Yeah.
So were all these walls completely obscured?
Yes, they were all clothed in plaster. What this design allowed us to do was to reveal the stone walls inside. It certainly feels as though what we're doing is honest, if you like, to the original construction of the house.
The solidity of the walls makes me feel very safe and secure in here too. I feel kind of almost like I'm being given a big hug by this house.
If you're here in a gale in February and the wind's howling outside, being tucked in here does feel extremely secure.
The judges praised a scheme that is rooted in place, rich in history, but also rich in contemporary detail and delight. It's a beautifully made home that makes the best of its magical setting.
Standing here in the middle of this house, you can see the sea, the front drive, the walled garden, and behind me, the old oak tree. So right in the centre of this big old house, you still feel incredibly connected to the surroundings.
Wherever it can, this building brings you closer to the outdoors. These window seats are a new opportunity to sit and gaze. A nice touch from the architect, Steph MacDonald.
When we realised we had these kind of half a metre thick stone walls, then a window seat was sort of natural thing to do. So they're all dotted around the house, and it's just a very social thing, a window seat actually. People can perch, they can chat while somebody's doing something else.
Details like this are delightful social touches, blessing the building with a great deal of humanity and banishing decades of thoughtless design.
It's just so hard to imagine what it could have looked like before.
The process was very slow. We bought it and lived in it for a year before we started even approaching people about what we might do. We did get a bit impatient in the first year, and so we took down all the old curtains and just decided to live with no curtains at all. And we decided, because we didn't like the wallpaper, that we spray painted and had big marker pens. I thought this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to just do it, because we know we're going to take all of that down.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting part of the story that you can take an existing house, and in order to make something that is both brilliant for modern day living but also has some resonance with its location and its history, it's not necessary to flatten it. You can take what's best of the original structure and you can rework it into a modern house.
Old places are complicated to work on. The simple rigour of new build didn't apply here. Every detail had to be crafted and adapted to where it comes in the building. New work reinterprets the place's existing materials in a lighter language, such as the staircase designed by Steph.
The actual form of the balustrade, if this was just straight and this thin, that's the kind of break point, that's the compression. So by thickening it in the middle and allowing it to be slender at the top, you get a sense of slenderness and lightness to it, but actually it's the strongest structural shape.
What an elegant way of adding strength and lightness. Steph hasn't stopped at balusters, though. She's also treated structural columns in the building as crafted objects in the same way. They were made in Somerset by Jonathan Dethier and James Bryce.
Each one of those columns would have taken about 4 to 5 hours. It's an old trade. It's one of the oldest trades around, is being wood turner. I mean, you can trace it back to the Romans and the Egyptians. The columns we did for Coastal House started off like this, and then obviously to get the curve, the curves had to be put in by hand to the set diameters we got off a template.
But has all this simple, naked craftsmanship changed the building in the eyes of those who know it best? Norman Eastley, the local tenant farmer, has been working the land here for 17 years.
What they've done is unbelievable. You know, I'm still speechless, really. Those pieces of oak and the whole design, the stonework. You know, I'm not an architect or a judge. I'm just, what I see is what I think, you know.
This farmhouse had kind of lost its way over the last 100 years, but by celebrating its bone structure and traditional stone and slate, Sally and Edward have brought it back to something that's really firmly rooted in both its history and the location.
So far, we've seen 2 charming houses, rich in soul and spirit. There are 3 more to visit before we find out which have made the shortlist for House of the Year. That is how Isaac Newton discovered gravity, sort of. History is, you see, chock full of examples of everyday objects inspiring great things, demonstrating that it's often from humble origins that the most powerful ideas grow. The origins of our next house are as humble as it gets. Damien Burrows is in Yorkshire to see it. This is Old Shed, New House. Once a farming shed for tools and tractors, now reincarnated as a glamorous home. Inside, it has sleek, modern spaces, smooth finishes, and high-tech insulation and heating. It still retains the shape and character of the original farm building. Downstairs, a long gallery leads to a modern kitchen, and nestled between a functional dining room and a bedroom, there's a double-height library containing hundreds of books. Upstairs, a bridge takes you across to the upper library level, with 2 further bedrooms occupying both ends of the house. The owners are book-mad David and Lauren, who wanted to build a place to retire to. Luckily for them, they had a son who was an architect.
There was a sort of mild panic where I realised I'd be responsible for their whole life savings. But growing up, I might have been somewhat of a nightmare child. So it was very nice to be able to go some way to, give them something back.
What a way to do it. Greg worked with the lead architect, Mike Tonkin, to make a building that would sit happily in its place. The exterior has been clad with shot-blasted larch and galvanised steel, the colours matching the silvery bark of the surrounding birch trees. And the varied horizontal slats are a nod to the building that was here originally.
Hey.
Hi there. Hi.
Lauren, how are you?
Very nice to see you.
David,
Hi.
really good to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too.
What was on the site before?
There was a shed, really more like a very large gardener's shed, wooden and steel framed. The architects had the idea of keeping the design of the original shed.
I think the first thing we thought was we need some windows.
They help.
Yeah.
Always useful. Retaining the shape of the old agricultural shed retains some continuity on the site. The new place carries a memory of the old. it was also a clever way to save money.
We kept the steel frame from the original shed, so we didn't have to buy any new. Kept all the timber. We extended the concrete floor slab. We've done farm buildings before, but they've just been industrial jobs, cladding actual farms. We haven't converted any farms into larch-clad, bespoke dwellings, no.
It took almost a year to transform a storage space for agricultural machines into this.
Wow, what an incredible space.
Old Shed, New House brought gasps of admiration from the RIBA jury, who commended the exquisite detailing of the house. The tree-lined approach continues right through an indoor corridor towards the open-plan kitchen.
This is such a wonderful space to be in.
It's a point at which we can see into much of the house and also the fabulous vista down the birch trees.
And just a few steps across the corridor/art gallery is this.
Oh God, wow. This is an incredible library.
It's a book lover's paradise for David and Lauren to enjoy well into their retirement.
There's so much light in here, it's absolutely fantastic. But it's directly in the centre of the house, occupying what you could say is the prime piece of the whole home.
We had the confidence to make this the kind of principal space because I personally knew how much time my parents spent in what was their old library. We knew that that would be where they spent most of their time. So we made the kind of living space smaller because in a way this is actually also the living space. Often libraries are kind of quite dark and kind of moody, and we wanted something else, something that spoke more of the kind of landscape outside. And so we wanted to really open it up. And we always saw the library as this kind of almost like a clearing in a forest where you'd kind of sit and read a book, or sitting under a tree and reading a book.
To achieve the dappled light and shade of a forest clearing, they used wooden slats and a perforated roof grille below a skylight. This is architecture as a canopy of leaves. Mirrors behind the bookshelves reflect the greenery outside and make the room seem much larger. Ideas like this were a leap of faith for Lauren and David.
We wouldn't have ever, embarked on this really if we didn't have a son who was an architect, because you need a lot of courage to do something like this.
Having the confidence to root your home in the past, whilst you're still developing your hopes and dreams for the future, well, that's a very complex architectural puzzle. I'm so impressed by how Lauren and David have risen to that challenge and created a truly stunning home.
If you've ever lived in an old house, you'll know that we don't buy old places in a kind of cool, rational way, but, well, usually out of some kind of romantic impulse. We fall in love with them. Then comes the dilemma of whether to restore, adapt, conserve, fundamentally alter, or even, in a fit of pique, destroy it. Preservation, evolution, or revolution. Sometimes we need to throw off the yoke of the old in order to truly evolve. The city of Bath is beautiful, principally because of one big idea: Georgian architecture.
These 18th century honey-coloured buildings have helped to make the city a protected World Heritage Site. No surprise then that over 5,000 of them are listed and fiercely protected.
Those people who are lucky enough to live in listed buildings, you are actually a custodian for the future, really, rather than necessarily an owner who can do what they like.
There are always going to be tremendous challenges to building in a city like Bath.
Rising to those monumental challenges is our next long-listed house, Duncan Cottage. A Grade 2 listed 1790s building with a brand spanking new 21st century extension. On the ground floor is a kitchen and dining room that opens out onto an internal courtyard. There are 2 studies, as well as a living space that connects onto the new extension. And on the first floor are 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. The owner is Hilary, who bought this epic restoration project with her husband, Richard.
Look at that. Hello.
Hi.
Hilary. How are you?
Very well.
Nice house.
Thank
Beautiful
you.
place. What kind of nick was it in when you found it? Was it?
Lots of 1970s interior, cupboards everywhere.
Yeah. So you didn't fall in love
I
with it?
didn't fall in love with it. No, Richard fell in love with it. He could see the potential.
But before Hilary and Richard could start work on site, there was a tragedy. Richard passed away in 2010, leaving Hilary facing the project alone.
You could so easily have just said, you know what, move on, do something else.
No, after Richard passed, it was definitely something that I felt was a positive move for us to carry through what his visions were. It was kind of a therapeutic thing for us.
Inside, what were a series of dark rooms have been knocked through to make bright open spaces that flow easily from one to another. The historic features here, from the elegant sash windows to the beautiful Georgian staircase, have all been cherished and polished to their former glory.
Beautiful handrails and staircase. These were all here, were them?
Yes, these were here.
Yeah.
While the kitchen has been revamped for the 21st century.
Oh, wow. This is, on the other hand, what you'd call a strong modern intervention. A big slab of a kitchen. And a big slab of a room as well, isn't it? It's kind of very simple.
The judges praised Duncan Cottage for transforming an 18th century listed home to meet 21st century requirements. But the invasive work needed to transform it all took place while Hilary was living there.
Wow, with everything looking...
A mess.
A mess.
Absolutely, everything covered in dust. I wouldn't do it that way again. I would definitely move out.
Hilary's unwillingness to move out of the home she'd bought with her late husband almost doubled the programme, which was supposed to be 9 months.
Ended up taking nearly 18 months because of the process of what we had to go through, moving room to room. When we were about to rip out our kitchen and we walked in the morning and she had guests staying. So we had a family at a table, we had her friends sitting there, and we were sort of there ready to go with our tools to take her kitchen out.
Hilary wanted to replace the 1970s conservatory with something less hideous. Not an easy thing to do on a Grade 2 listed building in a World Heritage Site.
How was Bath Planning Department about that?
We met resistance. Strictly speaking, the Listed Building Act doesn't allow you to take anything away from these buildings or add to them without justification.
The architect, James Grayley, and his team delved into the history of the house and discovered that it was built by a well-known 18th century architect, John Palmer. Several old plans show a structure on the side of the house labelled loggia, or outdoor room. Palmer's 18th century drawings convinced Bath Council to let Hilary build her modern extension. A historic plan carefully reinterpreted for the 21st century.
And now, across this threshold into this. Now, there's a nice simple clarity about this. Change of level, 2 different sizes of windows. What would Richard have made of this, do you think?
I think he would have loved this space. I often wonder what he would think about it, but I'm sure he'd love it.
To connect the modern extension to its historic setting, only one material would do: Bath stone. It's what most of the city is made of, and it comes from deep inside this local quarry.
Bath stone is a fantastic material to work with. We've got to cut the stone precise because you don't really want to see the joints. Although techniques have changed, it's still a traditional trade, still using hand tools.
And the end result speaks for itself. A house built across the centuries, harmonised by one material. This project helps move the city forward into the 21st century.
What this building does is what great architecture does at any scale. It reorganises, repurposes and revitalises an existing place. And it does that with tremendous conviction and clarity and determination. Now, this project is important. And it's quiet.
We have one more exquisite house to see from our Houses with a Past category.
Started on this construction site, I was 17, and by the time we finished, I was 23.
Before we find out which of them the RIBA judges have shortlisted for House of the Year.
Breathing new life into a bit of old junk, well, that does require imagination sometimes, to be able to see beyond what other people perceive as just a piece of rubbish. There we are. It is time-consuming, of course. It does require patience. It can be precise, but it will reward you for all of the effort taken. There. Has anybody seen the handle?
Time and patience on an epic scale were required at our next house, hidden away deep in the Worcestershire countryside. Damien Burrows went to find it.
What an incredible setting. The house is just framed perfectly by the flanks of the bridge. This is really what you call a sense of arrival.
Reaching back 400 years into the past is the old courthouse, once a family home for small-scale farmers in the 17th century. It's a house of two halves. On one side is a careful restoration of an old ruin with salvaged timbers and sympathetic reproduction fittings, while the other half is built from scratch, light and modern, but in the spirit of the original. It took over 5 years to bring this old house back to life. In the old part, there's a basement, a library room and a study on the ground floor, and 2 bedrooms on the first floor. It's connected by a hallway to the new section, where there's an open-plan living room and kitchen, 2 bedrooms on the first floor, and another bedroom and study in the attic. The man who oversaw the epic task of building this was architect Rhys Brooks.
Rhys.
Damien, welcome.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Good to meet you.
When Rhys first took on the project, all that remained of the original house was 4 wobbly walls and a chimney stack.
Was there a moment of cutting back all of the undergrowth, standing back and just going, oh?
Yes, there are many moments like that, you know. Many moments of fear and many moments of how on earth do I deal with this?
As Rhys investigated the structure, he realised it was in worse condition than he could have imagined.
It'd been abandoned for 30, 40 years. There were trees growing out of it. There were birds and bats. It had basically become feral. There is no structural bracing at all. And you could literally see this thing moving in the wind. You could literally push it with your hand. It was a storm away from complete loss.
The RIBA judges praised the amazing job Rhys and his team did in salvaging as much of the old building as they could, from roof tiles to 400-year-old timbers, in order to make a new home of distinctive character.
Oh, this is such a great room.
The library, as with much of this part of the house, has been entirely recreated from scratch. Getting the details right required some unorthodox detective work.
We did find some bits of what we believe were original Tudor panelling in the local farmhouse, acting as somebody's bed's head, you know, and we were able to actually replicate the panelling from that.
Did you take his bed head?
We did take his bed head, yes.
I hope they asked him first. The same level of detail and craftsmanship continues upstairs in the landing and bedrooms. Much of the original timber has been painstakingly salvaged, repaired and reused. And a new oak frame helps the gentle transition to the new part of the house.
Wow, this is a really different space from the other side of the house.
Yeah.
It's light, it's airy, it's really wide, and you've got stunning views out. The change in the character of the room, going from the medieval part of the house into the new, you would automatically think that that would be quite a harsh transition. It's much more subtle.
Using timber framing in both actually brings them together. We had a palette of materials that we inherited from the historic structure, and we've just felt that actually, to get the continuity, we've just pulled those through into the new bit.
And you're constructing it the same way as well. I mean, the guys are on site with chisels, hammers, and just erecting it by hand.
Absolutely.
Exactly how they would have with the original.
Precisely.
The distinction between old and new in this house is clear but subtle. New roof tiles were made in 4 different sizes, and their colours were carefully matched to the old salvaged tiles. The windows, too, are new, but utterly traditional in design. They were made by a small firm in Warwickshire. 400 years ago, glass was expensive and difficult to make in big pieces. So, to form a window, tiny sections would be set in a lattice of lead. It was called a leaded light.
It's a slow process. The leaded light maker slowly builds up the leaded light, pane by pane. It would take him 3 days to do that. They then go into a process of leaded light cementing, which makes them weatherproof. They're then left to set for normally at least 2 weeks. It's then cleaned off, they're buffed up, polished with a real bristle brush. They are good then for the next 150 years.
What could be more characterful than an ancient and authentically crafted home? Unless, of course, you have to physically build the thing.
At times, it seemed it was taking 4 steps back, 1 step forward. When I rebuilt the chimney, I was basically on my hands and knees for weeks and weeks, taking bits of stone out, replacing it with bricks. The traditional method probably took a good 6 times longer, if not more. It's just such a time-consuming job, and you need patience with a saint. I started on this construction site, I was 17, and by the time we finished, I was 23. Yeah, I was quite proud. I was telling my mates and that, oh, on this 16th century courthouse job, it's better than your flat pack house you're building and stuff like that.
The current tenants are big fans too. A retired army officer, Giles, and his family.
It's almost like a reverse TARDIS, so it looks huge from the outside, but actually when you come in, it's so cleverly configured that nothing's too small, nothing's too large, and it's beautifully crafted as well. So I you know, in an idle moment when I've got a toothbrush in my mouth, I mean, I will look at the craftsmanship, and I just, you know, I think that's almost lost these days, and that's what's so wonderful about this house.
There's also a pub just a mile down the road, which is always a good one.
It's incredible what can be achieved when you take the time to understand a building and truly get to know its past. Reese and his team have spent the past 5 years painstakingly restoring this old wreck. And in the process, they've created an architectural masterpiece.
So that completes today's selection from the long list for House of the Year. The Gin Distillery, infused with light and imagination. Coastal House, a marvel of pared-back ruggedness. Old Shed New House that wraps a home around a library. Duncan Cottage, where Georgian meets modern. And the revived ruin of the old courthouse.
5 beautiful homes, like illuminated manuscripts, all embellished with a rich past. The question is, which of them have the RIBA judges decided to put through to the shortlist?
Niall Maxwell, one of the judges, is here with the answer.
You've chosen how many projects for the shortlist?
We've chosen 2, and the first of them is Old Shed, New House. Old Shed is a model for the future of reusing existing agricultural buildings and turning them into modern dwellings.
The library is a key, powerful room, isn't it?
This is the jewel in the crown for me because it works on so many levels. On 3 sides, all behind the books, it's all mirrored. It's a very clever way of enlarging a room, which is really quite domestic in scale. You're looking at it as an architect going, that's very clever.
Wow.
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 Really, really wonderful news. We're particularly delighted for all the people, Greg and everyone else who made the house happen.
So what's the second project you've shortlisted?
Well, the second one is Coastal House. It is a very clever reimagining of an existing country house. You actually feel like you're a detective trying to work out which bits of the building were original and which bits are new. For a long time, they spoke about building a new house, and only fairly late in the day realised that they could work with what was there. And therefore, it's the skill of the architects who have managed to really redress this house and transform it into something for modern living.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing. Oh, my God. Cool.
That's brilliant.
Hey.
Fantastic.
That's just really unexpected and lovely and amazing. And I think for this house, it's very quiet in what it's doing. So it's very exciting that it's been recognised. That's really nice.
So, the bookish barn that is Old Shed New House and the delightfully reworked Coastal House join Red House and Pheasants on the shortlist. We'll be finding out who the overall winner of the RIBA House of the Year is at the end of the series.
A house is a bit like an old photograph album. It can tantalisingly suggest the person who made it, the people who were in it, their stories, and even speak of the time that it was made. But very much unlike photographs, buildings have a physical structure that you can explore and experience, and their stories change. They go on to have a life of their own, providing joy and shelter to countless people for hundreds of years after they're built. Buildings can regenerate, and they can rewrite their own narratives with each generation long after any memories fade. They are quite magical.
Next time, we'll continue our tour of the long list, looking at extreme houses.
These cantilevers could have worked if they were half the size.
It wouldn't have been so dramatic. You're going to do something once, you might as well make a go of it.